Hello and welcome to this yummy chocolate chunk of NLP. My name is Jackie Wright of Everyday NLP, and to me NLP is like a huge bar of chocolate. It's made up of so many little chunks, and what I'm going to do for you is chunk them right down to nice little yummy bite-sized pieces for you to learn. So what's today about? This particular session is about the useful principle. And the useful principle is pretty much what it says on the tin. It is useful. So what am I talking about here when it comes to the useful principle? You'll be absolutely familiar with a saying that says you've got to be positive. You need to be positive. You have to act positive. You have to respond positively. All of these things are said all of the time. And there's behaviours and ways of doing things that we label as positive. So smiling, being happy, having a positive mindset, all of these things are bandied about all the time. At the same time, we label other emotions and responses as negative. So we will say that being angry is a negative emotion. Being sad is a negative emotion. Crying, being somber. There's a whole range of things that we label as emotions and responses that are negative. So we're all familiar with what's considered to be positive and what's considered to be negative, and we're all encouraged to be positive because being positive is the way forward. I would encourage you to drop using those words. Forget positive and negative. For me, that means that you lose a whole range of possible ways of responding and being in the world because they've been labelled as negative. And all you're left with is a whole bunch of positive ways of being in the world because that's how they've been labelled. My challenge to you is it always useful to be happy? Well, yeah, a lot of the time it's useful. But do you know what? Sometimes it's not useful to be happy. Sometimes it's not useful to be smiling all the time. Sometimes it's not useful to be so positive all the time. Sometimes it's more useful to be more somber. Sometimes it's useful to be angry. Sometimes it's useful to be sad. And sometimes it's useful to cry. So what I'm saying here is, let's forget positive and negative. Let's free every possible human response that's available to us by labelling it as, is it useful at that point in time? Is that the most useful thing that you could be doing? So if I'm at somebody's party and everybody's having a great time and I want to have a great time, then it's going to be useful for me to be happy. It's going to be useful for me to be jumping all over the place, being a crazy woman. If I'm at a funeral, it's not useful for me to be that way. It's more useful for me to be somber, thoughtful, and to actually be with the people at that time. So the basic question you need to ask yourself when you're in a situation and you need a way of responding is this the most useful way of responding? Is the way that you're doing it useful? Because if it hasn't been working for you, then that's a really good question. Could you be doing it differently? And if you could, what would be the most useful way of doing it? Because if turning up all the time with the smile on your face and being bouncy all the time isn't actually working for you, then it's time to ask the useful principle question. What would be more useful for me to do for certain situations? Sometimes it's useful to be angry. Sometimes it's useful to really get your blood boiling and really let vent that anger. But just for that period of time. Sometimes it's useful to be sad, somber, and be thinking about things in a different way for that moment in time. So the useful principle frees you allows you to have all of the different responses that are available to you, and all you have to do is say, is what I'm doing useful right now? If the answer is yes, great, carry on doing it. If the answer is no, great, think about what would be more useful and do that instead. Now, the useful principle isn't just for making those decisions in the moment about what will be the most useful thing to be doing. As a word, it really is useful. Now, I've found that one of the great places to use the useful principle and use the word useful is in group situations. Now, I don't know if you have the same experience that I do, but if I'm in a group situation and we're debating and talking about something and maybe trying to problem solve something, then occasionally somebody will come up with an idea that, you know, ain't that great. But they've come up with the idea and it is possible that they are very influential in that group. How difficult is it to challenge that particular idea? How difficult is it to come up with the right words that can challenge somebody's idea without making it look as though you are trying to put them down, make them look stupid? And especially if it's somebody who may be your boss, or maybe somebody who has a lot of influence in that group, one of the things you don't want to be doing is to be seen as confrontational. I certainly like to be collaborative in everything that I do in a group. So here's the tip using useful. If somebody has that kind of idea and you're thinking, I don't think that's really what we're looking for, what you can say, and variations of this is, do you know, that's a brilliant idea. I'm wondering if it's really the most useful thing, or that sounds like it could be useful, let's talk about it. Or, do you know, if that's useful, then maybe we can look to see how useful it is. Now, those kind of responses, as I'm saying it to you, I'm sure you noticed how that made you curious about talking about if that is the right thing to do. Now, I know when I've used it, and I've used it to just say to somebody, is that the most useful thing that we're doing? Can we talk about how useful that's going to be? Everybody in the room suddenly sits up and they're thinking, do you know what? I've got some ideas about that as well. Let's talk it through. And it becomes a great collaboration in the group. So the useful principle has two sides to it. One is to ask yourself the question, is this thing that I'm doing, or the response that I'm anticipating doing, is that going to be the most useful thing? If it isn't the most useful thing, work out what is going to be more useful. And if you're in a group situation, just using the word useful as the challenge really opens up the debate and brings about strong collaboration. So that's the useful principle. I hope you've enjoyed today's chocolate chunk of NLP. I know I have. And I hope to see you again soon. This is Jackie Wright from Everyday NLP, bringing you the chocolate gorgeous yumminess of NLP in small bite-sized chunks.